Al Jazeera podcasts.
Today, men in Madrid say police are attacking them because of their sexual orientation.
My friends, they realize that if they look queer, they can get arrested in the street, in a democracy, in a European country.
We'll show you how it ties into a crackdown on drugs and how a community is fighting back. I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take. Spain is considered one of the world's gay capitals. It was the third country to pass an equal marriage law in 2005.
Today in Spain, we recognize the right of individuals to marry others of the same sex.
Yet, in its capital, Madrid, men who engage in same-sex relations say they are under siege, that they are being harassed, humiliated, and discriminated against by law enforcement. Now, police say they are just cracking down on drugs, but activists claim it goes far beyond just drug policy. It's also about a legacy of homophobia.
Spain was one of the pioneers regarding queer rights in Europe. It's one of the countries where people, when being asked in the street, usually has better opinions on queer people. It doesn't mean that LGBTI phobia doesn't exist. It simply adopts new forms. My name is Christo Casas. I'm a journalist and anthropologist from Spain, and I work on how public policies affect queer people.
So, Christo, this is a story that's not getting a lot of attention. But then last week, the Spanish newspaper Público published an article documenting 3 men and their stories of violent and humiliating treatment at the hands of Madrid police. And many said this is systematic. Now, this article may have come as a shock, I think, to many readers in Spain. Was it a shock to you?
I'm actually not quite shocked because we queer people are used to police harassing us or to police being homophobic. But it may be a shock for a society that thought that when they gave us the right to have same-sex marriage, or they gave us the right to have families, everything was solved. So I guess now society is discovering that there's way more things and there is way more right that queer people are still in need in Spain.
There was one account in the article that I'd like to ask you about. It was the story of a man named Luis, who says he was set up by the police. Can you tell us Luis's story?
Yeah, exactly. Luis, he got a message asking him to please come to a sex party in a building and bring with him 2 grams of methamphetamine, which is a drug used for sex. He was then detained. He was arrested in the door. And after that, he has been through a law process and now is charged with 3 years imprisonment.
Wow.
So what we're seeing in here is police inducting queer men to commit crimes and then arresting them for committing those crimes these police inducted in the first place.
Okay, so there is a context here. There's a drug subculture in many world capitals, not just Spain. But for someone who's never heard of the term, how would you describe chemsex?
Yeah, chemsex is whenever you use drugs to have longer sessions of sex. I mean, you use drugs so the pleasure gets longer, or you use drugs so you can have excitement during more time. Doesn't only happen with gay men. Actually, if there is a concept in Spain, we call it fiesta blanca, white party, which is exactly the same process using cocaine between straight people. Straight people use cocaine more usually than queer people.
Yeah.
But methadone, methamphetamine, or ketamine are really queer drugs or queer-coded drugs.
Yeah. Is there a public health concern to chemsex, not just in the gay community, but broadly, that you think has a genuine public interest in the authorities kind of keeping an eye on or cracking down on?
There is a public health issue with drugs in general, not only with drugs and sex, but what countries like Portugal has showed us in history is that if you want to address drugs as a public health issue, you cannot harass the consumers, you cannot prosecute them through police, you have to help with public health policies, like for example, responsible consumption or giving free mental health care to the consumers, so they will stop consuming, or they will slow down their consumption, or they will make a responsible consumption. That means consuming but not engaging into dangerous behaviors, isn't it? What we've seen in Madrid is that they're using police to prosecute the consumers. And if you take the data, every time you use police to prosecute consumers of drugs, what happens is that there is an increasement of dangers, that people consume in more dangerous circumstances, that they consume worse substances, and then there are bigger health issues. So the point here is that the government of Madrid is saying that this is not about gay people, it's about public health and drugs. The policies they are applying, the police harassment, it's actually increasing the risk. It's actually making the situation worse.
Yeah.
So I don't think they are actually aiming to reduce the drug consumption, because if they were, they will defund police and use those funds into public mental health care, for example.
Christo, I know you live in Barcelona, not in Madrid, but I'm curious to know, have you had anyone near you, any of your friends experience some of this harassment?
Yeah, even though I don't live in Madrid, I have many acquaintances and many friends in there. And I have a couple of friends that they were, in a Sunday morning at 7 a.m., they were going to hitchhike in the mountain nearby Madrid. But they were identified by the police as a gay couple because they look like a gay couple. So they were arrested in the street. They checked on their clothes and everywhere if they were having drugs, and they were asking them if they could bring them, the police, to the nearest Chemsex party. The police identified them as gay people, so the police deduced that they were committing a crime. When we see that happening, for example, with migrants or with racialized people, we understand that this is a racial profiling of the people, and that this is a hate crime committed by the police. But we are discovering now that they also do gender profiling or queering profiling. So they're stopping people in the street just because they look queer, and they are inducing to commit a crime, or deducing that they are committing a crime. So my friends realized that if they look queer, they can get arrested in the street in a democracy, in a European country.
Okay, we're going to get into that more. I just want to say, of course, the police have a much different spin on this. They claim they are not just targeting gay men, but just individuals who use drugs. They claim this is not any form of discriminatory search, nor directed at any specific group, but rather they just act in, quote, areas and spaces where they believe criminal activity may exist. What do you make of this?
I make that those areas that they are targeting are casually queer, all of them. They are not doing these raids or this harassment in the queues of straight discourse. They only doing them in the queues of gay discourse and of gay saunas, of gay dark rooms. They go specifically to those spaces that are coded for queer people, and they look for the criminals in there. But if it was just a war on drugs, as they say, they would also go to straight spaces or to straight discos, but they don't.
There was another person mentioned in this article, Daniel. Tell me about Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel is a person who was also arrested on the queue of a disco one night. He got directed to the police station and he spent the night in there. Daniel, after 2 years, because this was in 2021, he has changed his whole lifestyle. And he has changed the way he dresses, the way he expresses his gender. And now he says that whenever he has to go in the streets in Madrid, even if he's going for a party, he's wearing a suit and a shirt, like a formal shirt. His words, he's dressing like if he was going to work in the office 24 hours, because he has realized that whenever he's wearing a piece of clothes that is related to queer culture, he will get arrested by police. All of those stories are basically a violation of human rights.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so insidious because it creates conformity. I mean, you wrote an entire book on this phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly. What I wrote is that they have not given rights to the queer people. They have given rights to the queer people as long as queer people performs or act as if they were straight. And this case in Madrid is actually showing us how that works, because if this story of Madrid was happening in El Cairo, or if it was happening in Uganda, we will for sure be saying that the police is having a dictatorial attitude. But since it's happening in a democracy, we do not realize that the police role in this country is to keep the norms, to keep the status quo, to keep people acting straight or acting white or acting able, because they only execute violence on minorities. And we, the minorities, are not to be believed.
Okay, Christo. So this is where the plot thickens for me, because we're not just talking about discriminatory enforcement. We're also talking about discriminatory policy. So we talked about this with journalist Maria Martinez Collado. She specializes in public health issues and was the first one to break this story.
A ver, para entender bien el problema,
to truly understand the issue, one must be familiar with the threshold system established by the National Institute of Toxicology. This organization sets reference quantities for each drug. If someone possesses an amount below that threshold, it is considered personal use and in principle would only result in an administrative sanction. However, if they carry more, the law may interpret it as drug trafficking, which carries prison sentences. The problem is that these thresholds are outdated. They do not reflect real consumption patterns, and more worryingly, they are not applied equally to all substances. In Spain, possessing up to 7 grams of cocaine or up to 2.5 grams of heroin is considered personal use, yet carrying just 1 gram of ketamine can already lead to a drug trafficking charge. This is where biases emerge, ultimately leading to discrimination and the stigmatization of the LGBTIQ+ community, which we are denouncing. Substances like ketamine, GHB, or methamphetamine, more commonly associated with chemsex contexts, have much lower thresholds than other, more mainstream drugs. And that's not all. In some cases, these thresholds are not fixed, but left to the interpretation of the law enforcement, opening the door to arbitrary decisions like those revealed by the testimonies published by Publico last week.
So, Christo, 7 grams of cocaine is considered personal use, yet 1 gram of something like ketamine is trafficking? I mean, what's your take on this?
Yeah, my take on this is that normal, it's not the same as legal, but normal does influence what we consider legal. So, cocaine may not be legal, but in the general society, the consumption of cocaine is quite normal or normalized. So since it's normalized, the limit for it to be legal or illegal is higher. On the other side, being queer is not normal. And the consumption of methadone or ketamine is something queer people do, not general society. So it's easier for queer consumption to be catalogued as illegal, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what is happening here is that even the law is conceived from a straight point of view. So the drugs that the straight people used to consume have a larger limit, while the drugs queer people used to consume has more limited limits.
Yeah, not just, I mean, 7 grams.
7 grams,
1
it's
gram.
a lot.
It's a lot
you could
of
die
cocaine.
from that, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So the law gives police ample opportunity to crack down, but there's also another factor at play here. I want to ask you about one more of the men mentioned in this article. Alberto was another gay man who says he was threatened by police. They told him, "Now you will see what happens to you in Leganitos, the police station." He says they made him completely undress. Then he describes 8 officers surrounding him while he was strip searched. Do you think there's a homophobia problem in the Spanish police?
Absolutely, yes. I actually think there is a homophobia problem in the police as a system everywhere, not only in Spain. As I was telling before, the main role of police is maintaining the status quo, is maintaining straightness, is maintaining whiteness, is maintaining ableism. So despite prosecuting some crimes here and there, what they actually do is to make sure that society keeps on being straight, white, ableist, male, machoist, and something... So the society doesn't have a big revolution, a big change, a big cultural revolution. So here in Spain specifically, we have a police which is kind of Francoist. It's a police that has a culture that comes from our dictatorship. And when you look into the newspapers from the 50s, from the 60s, you can actually read the same stories that Publico is publishing by now. Like police would go during the Franco's dictatorship to saunas or to gay clubs that were not legal and raid them and arrest the people in there. The practices of the police haven't changed that much. During the last 20 years, since we adopted same-sex marriage and same-sex adoption, we have actually invested a lot into educating, schooling the police into how to avoid LGBTI phobia. And what we are seeing in this story published by Publico and in these stories happening in Madrid is that what police has learned is not to stop being LGBTI phobic. What they have learned is how to identify LGBTI people in the street easily and how to detect what crimes are more possible to be committed by LGBTIQ plus people. So they go to queer spaces and detain them.
Yeah, I mean, look, the ultra-conservative government in Madrid just defunded the Observatory Against Homophobia. I mean, there are 209 cases of homophobia recorded back in 2023. And then it even just, chemsex has been around for a while. This isn't a new phenomenon. Are things getting worse, not better in Spain?
Yeah, I think things in the whole Western countries are getting worse because the extreme right are moving what we call the Overton window, isn't it? So Overton window is what we think it's acceptable to say or what we think it's acceptable to act in public. But governments like Meloni's, like Donald Trump's or like Milei's are moving this window towards more extreme right policies, extreme right opinions. So maybe 15 or 20 years ago, when we adopted same-sex marriage, it wasn't really, let's say, cool or acceptable to harass gay people in the streets. But now that they have focused so much on trans rights and on trans kids and on trans people on the sports, acting homophobic or saying or having expressing homophobic opinions in public is getting more acceptable. And that reinforces the role of police in Madrid, for example.
The authorities can't claim ignorance here. The highest authority that oversees police in Spain, the Ministry of Interior, got an extensive letter from an activist on October 4th detailing this harassment. What has been the response so far from the ministry?
Actually, this minister has said that if we have problems with police, we should denounce it to the police itself. So apparently he expects the police to investigate itself.
Okay.
Yeah, something that is, let's say, queer about this story is that our minister is actually a gay man.
Wow.
And this proves the failure of liberal identity politics during the last 15 or 20 years. Why? Because we have expected that if a person who belongs to our same community gets to a space of power, he will act solidarity with the rest of the collective. And what we are seeing is that when women get to power, when Black people get to power, when this gay minister gets to power, they actually are defending and in solidarity with the rest of people in power. So what I expect from the queer communities in Spain and Europe to learn about this case of this gay minister not helping any gay men in Madrid when they're being harassed by police on the street, right, is that we need to get back to the class policies too. And we need to get back to a class discourse where we learn that the people who will help us is, to the gay working class men, is other working class people. And the rich gay men, they will help rich homophobics.
Okay, so I just want to wrap up on how you're fighting back. And so from an American perspective, this reminds me of the crack cocaine laws that were passed in the 1980s, right? Just for explanation, crack, which was predominantly used in Black neighborhoods, had mandatory minimum prison sentences, whereas the same amount of cocaine again, in powder form would have a much lesser punishment. And it's an example of how bad policy can be upstream of discrimination. So is that one of the rallying cries here for you, that if you change these threshold laws on these drugs, you can change the behavior of the police? You can't make them less homophobic, but you can change the incentives in targeting.
Yeah, I like this example because I actually call what is happening in Madrid respectability politics. And this concept comes from the Black movement from the USA, who actually denounced the same case as respectability politics. Like consuming cocaine is respectable, consuming crack is not respectable. So we are targeting unrespectable people. And that's what is happening exactly in Madrid. I think that the best way to fight back we are having right now is self-organization and class organization, and having our spaces where we can discuss between similar people, how can we help each other and protect each other from the people in power, isn't it? But I do think we should change the law. We should change these drug limits so we can have objective ways to fight the police interpretation of this law. Because one of the problems by Luis, Alberto, or Daniel, the three cases we have explained it here, is that whenever they get free from police station and they get a lawyer and they go into trial, it's really hard for them to get a sentence of innocence, because it's all an interpretation by police. Like, law can get interpreted by the police officers, and what we need is that the law to be objective, not an interpretation.
Christo Casas, thank you for coming on The Take.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. It was a pleasure.
And that's The Take. Do you think the war on drugs has taken police enforcement too far? What are things like in your city? I'll be personally reading through the comments, and I'm very curious to get your views on all of these issues. And if you want to catch more episodes like this, make sure you're following our YouTube playlist right here. That's where you'll find all of our recent content, which is updated regularly, so you will never miss an episode. And while you're at it, might as well hit that subscribe button so you stay in the loop with all things Al Jazeera English. We'll see you tomorrow.